OWCS Korea Stage 3 is slated to start this Friday. The final countdown towards the World Championship has begun, and 3 teams have the opportunity to keep their dreams of hoisting up a trophy alive here. This video will explain how Stage 3 will work, highlight the 9 teams that made it to the stage, as well as my personal predictions on where I think the teams rank by the end of the qualifiers. Let's begin with a very small rundown of how Korea works, because this stage is a little different compared to last year. So it's still 9 teams in the round robin at the beginning. That'll go from the 29th of August to the 21st of September. And when that's done, the top 8 still get a chance at the regional playoff, just like any other stage. But where things differ is this time Japan and Pacific have their own opportunity for a spot, while Korea have one last 6-man gauntlet to decide it all this October. Before we can get there though, let's take a look at what's in front of us here. Here's a brief vibe check for every team in the Korea qualifier. And the first team to discuss is the first place winner from Korea on Stage 2, Crazy Raccoon. Needless to say, they have a bit of a sour taste in their mouths after a very disappointing end to the midseason championship run where they lost in the first round of bracket play to Twisted Minds. Keep in mind, this is the first time in OWCS history that Crazy Raccoon were not a participant in a stage final. The sad truth about Crazy Raccoon is that they are not invincible and they have their work cut out for themselves. It seems like whenever there's any type of brawl-centric meta that they completely collapse. It happened in the World Finals last year against Falcons, and now we see it again here against Twisted Minds in the Ramatra setup. They've got to figure out their Achilles heel. This meta, there's a chance that it could stick around for a while still, and if they want to have the least possible difficult road to making it to Stockholm, they're going to have to play better during this upcoming stage. And that may not be easy, at least at the beginning. You can anticipate a potential slow start for Crazy Raccoon because Lip has decided to take off the first 2 weeks of Stage 3 due to personal circumstances and in order to prevent burnout. This team is still really good as a whole, obviously, and they're gonna win a lot of games still, but Lip has been a staple and one of the most consistent presences on this team since the very beginning. It's hard to replace a superstar of his caliber. In return, they did bring in Splint. Now it's gonna be him and Heesang at the helm at DPS, so it's gonna be a bit harder, especially because they're not holding back with the schedule for Crazy Raccoon. Right off the bat, they have Falcons in the very first day. They're also playing Way in that first week. They've got T1 coming up in week 2 as well. It's tough. They may actually get off to a very slow start in this upcoming stage, and they may not have all that favorable of a seed by the time we get to the playoff portion. Clearly, this is going to be a very challenging and telling stage. Crazy Raccoon have to endure a lot mentally, and they won't be at full force off the bat. They may suffer some tough losses, so we're going to see what this team is really made of. There's a lot of pressure that this team is facing, and I am curious to see if they can handle it. Crazy Raccoon early on are going to be one of the biggest teams to keep an eye on in Korea. But Crazy Raccoon are certainly not the only team having their resolve be tested. T1 are also going to have to go through an endurance test of their own. They actually had a very impressive Stage 2. They're coming off of a high note right now with some of the progress that they've made. Going from this bum team in Stage 1 who couldn't really hang in there to being the clear-cut number 2 team a lot of the time in Korea. It kind of sucked with how things ended in the EWC for them, but they did make a lot of meaningful strides, and that's what's important for a young team like this. So now we have to see if they can build on it. That's the key for T1. I'm trying to be optimistic here and see it as this was a good learning curve for them, a good opportunity to gain some needed experience to understand what it takes to play at such a high level. And what's great is they can build upon this now without having to worry about a bunch of potential roster changes like they did going from Stage 1 to Stage 2. It's basically the same team, but you're adding in one reinforcement in Jasmine, who's mostly just going to be a complementary piece who gives you another option to maybe slow down the tempo and have some map-specific compositions in mind like Sigma and Diva. But that's really it. It's not going to be as difficult of a mountain as to climb compared to Stage 1, let's say. Not to mention that the players are clearly very motivated with how hard they've practiced. Just look at Stage 1 and Stage 2, that in-between period, how much better they got in that short amount of time. You have players even taking on leadership roles if necessary. They're obviously well coached. And they're strong in a wide array of compositions, I think more than some people give them credit for. They're very strong on dive. They have that unique setup with the Wrecking Ball. They're like the only team that can really compete with Crazy Raccoon in that regard. Like I mentioned before, you got Jasmine to maybe add on to the field of choices. So overall, T1 in a really good spot. Let's just see if they can kind of cross over into that top tier consistently now. Speaking of young teams trying to stay near the top, Way are in a similar situation to a lesser extent, but still a really good roster after what we saw in Stage 2. They're back from the world of AGG, back to their original org, just with a slightly different spelling for whatever the heck reason, and they're rocking with basically the same squad. Like I mentioned, Jasmine over to T1, but then they add in Taejong to maybe have a bit more flexibility on the DPS end. Regardless, it's still not a bad team at all. They feel kind of like gatekeepers for the most part, where if you're either not skilled enough or really struggling, like what we saw at Zeta and Falcons last stage, you're not going to beat them, but they may not necessarily be the top dogs either. They probably don't have enough firepower still, but in a similar sense to T1, we're looking to see if they can apply lessons from the EWC and become a better team as a result. And they have some good strengths. Aid is rising as a star hitscan player. Stage 2, he had a lot of great performances, and I'm hoping he can build upon that here in Stage 3. Sunjun, good person to go alongside him as always. Never going to be top tier, but still very consistent. And then you have Taejong as well, who also provides a needed spark, I think, for this team with his tracer play, amongst other things. I'm glad he's on a Korean team. And again, the rest of the team, no one really terrible. Maybe not a lot of names that really stand out to you, but nothing terrible. If they can get lucky and the meta opens up a little bit more for them, they have a lot of bases set. They go fast. Milguru can play a lot of dive tanks well, including the Wrecking Ball. They like Sombra as well. This is a scary team to deal with if you aren't completely confident in yourself or if they catch you lacking. So definitely keep these guys in the back of your mind. Maybe not the biggest threat in the world, but they could ruin your day. The question is, will Zeta Division ruin the day of their fans heading into this upcoming stage? Zeta Division had a very rough stage too. Their record could have been worse, but when it came to performing in the big tournaments, both in the LCQ and the Korea tournament, they were just not good at all. They looked horrible, like they didn't belong out there, so they decided to make a couple of changes heading into this stage, and I think there's some pretty good ones. The most noteworthy thing is they have an actual main support player on the roster again. No more alexyOWL on main support. They've got Bliss, they brought him over for SSG, and I think it's a pretty good player to pick up. He has been very consistent in his career. He didn't play all that great on SSG, but I think on a Korean team that's more up to his level of comfort that he could play super well again. We've seen it in the past, so I'm glad that he's on this team and that alexyOWL can go back to playing some DPS, hopefully, and being a part of the rotation again. I thought that's when Zeta were at their best. During Stage 1, when alexyOWL and Pelican could kind of swap depending on the map, and then you have your hit scan in there at all times. If this team isn't completely and utterly broken, and they can eventually find that rhythm by the end of the stage, it could end up saving their season and giving them one last chance of actually making a big tournament in their long and sad history. Zeta Division needed change, and they got plenty of it. It goes beyond the main support situation because Flora, he decided to leave this team just like Violet did beforehand, and in his place they brought in Probe, and I think DPS is one of the more replaceable positions out there, so I don't necessarily hate the idea of trying something new. I think that if everything else clicks and Probe has some space to work with, it'll probably be very similar to what we saw with Flora, especially because Probe is actually coming off a relatively good stage over on Old Ocean from Stage 2. I thought he was the carry of that team at times, and I could see him doing very well next to the likes of Pelican and alexyOWL. The only weird thing is that they brought in Mag on this team. I guess for Winston and like Wrecking Ball, that should be fine, but I don't know if I want to see him out there besides that, just knowing how good Bernard has been in OWCS since it came into existence. We'll have to see what happens there. That could end up being a disaster, but at the very least, they don't have to play him. So generally, I think Zeta are in a much better place compared to Stage 2. We just have to hope that they're not completely and utterly mentally boomed after how horrible Stage 2 went. If they can come back strong and refine their resolve, this could be the stage where things finally turn around for them. Zeta will be looking to go on a comeback arc similar to Falcons, the next team that we've got to bring up. I mean, they're just coming off of a Stage 2 championship, when things seemed like they were absolutely doomer for them over there. Drama, people getting burnt out, and not winning many games, and all of a sudden they end up just winning the championship anyway. It's absolutely insane the level of skill this team has, and their ability to be clutch at the snap of a finger. It makes you wonder if there's any reason to even actually worry about them at this point, because it feels like whenever it matters the most, they just lock the hell in. Now, some people may say it was just their meta, and under different circumstances, maybe they get sent back down to earth, and that could be true because the rush brawly setups are clearly their bread and butter, but I firmly believe this is a very momentum-based team. It's whenever they get that one big win, they kind of just keep on going. It gives them that confidence. They kind of just need to prove to themselves they can do it, and then basically nobody can stop them at this point. We saw it happen last year where they locked in around this time of year and then they never looked back, and I think they could be on a very similar trajectory here. The only thing that remotely worries me at this point about Falcons is the whole Stalker situation. From the looks of it, he is not going to be on this roster for Stage 3 unless something suddenly changes. He was not listed there, we haven't heard any official news, but from the looks of it, he won't be on Team Falcons for the upcoming stage. With how good Proper and Merit looked in the previous tournament, it may not matter in the end, but Stalker has been a very pivotal part of this team since their inception. He's flexed between multiple roles, he won Finals MVP, and when him and Proper play together, they feel like they can find the solution to any problem. So now without him, you've got what you've got, and you gotta deal with it. Maybe in the end it'll be fine, maybe Stalker just needs to take a break and a refreshed Proper will take the lead from here. But it feels like something is missing without him. Proper and Stalker may have been the most unstoppable duo I've ever seen in my life. So without that, it's going to feel a little weird, and like there's a chance to maybe exploit some weaknesses depending on the situation. If the meta's stagnant, maybe it won't matter as much, but you never know what's going to happen with balance patches. That's the only risk that really applies to Falcons here. Not having that security blanket in Stalker. I'd love to see how they respond if things do get a little crazy with the meta. Mostly though, you gotta be feeling really good about Falcons. You can make a strong argument they're the best team in the entire world right now, and that the only thing that can realistically stop them is themselves. Or maybe Crazy Raccoon. That tends to be a team that gives them a lot of trouble, but maybe with how they're playing, it won't even matter. I'm excited to watch these guys go out there and continue from their great end to Stage 2. Then there's the final four teams, the playoff hopefuls, I'd like to say. The one that I personally am the most excited about is Onside Gaming, who went on a bit of a run to end Stage 2 and actually made it to that Stage 2 Korea playoff when nobody was really giving them a chance. I think they're heading in a good direction after pulling off a couple of upsets, and they even managed to add a couple of big name players to the team to make you feel even better about them. They added Kellen and Knife to this squad from North America, and I think those are some pretty tremendous pickups. Two players who maybe aren't superstars, but still add a lot of good value to a team that needed a couple of more things to really be taken remotely seriously. Kellen, I think, is coming off a pretty underrated Stage 2 on SSG. I think that team was just boomed, so it didn't really matter what he did. Those contributions might go more of a long way here on Onside. And Knife, while he did struggle at times on Team Liquid, is still a tremendous talent. We've seen him be successful on fully Korean teams, so there's a chance that he re-unlocks some of that carry potential that we were maybe missing a little bit when he did start on Liquid. Attack and Kellen, this is a duo that's played together many times before. They give you a lot of coverage. Opener and Irony, while not amazing, aren't always going to be very detrimental. I think they'll be okay enough for the standards you're looking for, and you upgraded at Flex DPS. I think Onside have done a really good thing here by adding a few pieces and not giving up that momentum. They're headed in the right direction, and I'm excited to see what they bring to the table here in Stage 3. Then there's the three teams that made it out of the promotion relegation. Thank you to these three for not letting Vec make it for another stage to completely embarrass themselves. But Old Ocean are making it back for another consecutive stage. Ryo Jae Hong, the legend himself, he's back with a little bit of an updated squad. They no longer have Probe, who went over to Zeta Division, but they do have Alien and Dart now to accompany Becky. They made a bit of a change at the tank situation, so there's a bit more flexibility there. Besides that, mostly the same team. Not overly impressive, but still a fun one to watch with some fan favorites. I like that they added Alien. I know Probe was playing well, but this is another guy who I think can shine, and you might be able to do it in a similar situation here on Old Ocean. Expectations aren't super high, and obviously there's things they're really not that great at. Once the meta shifted away from the things that they were super comfortable on, we saw them slip, and that resulted in that tough loss to Onside in the playoffs in Stage 2. So hopefully they were able to improve and they keep their foot on the gas. I don't know how much they have in the tank with some of these players, some of them not very experienced, in other situations maybe not skillful enough. I don't really know what to expect from this Old Ocean team. They surprised me at times in the previous stage. Maybe they do it again here, maybe not, but I'm glad they're here regardless. Old Ocean were not the only familiar face to make it out of promotion relegation though, because the former Stage 1 squad, A New Era, was able to make it back, now under a different org called Mirror Gaming, at least that's how I'm gonna pronounce it. But this team looks quite a bit different compared to the Stage 1 iteration. Basically, it's a different team besides Ruler and MCD. This squad is full of unknowns, a lot of them getting their first taste of what it's like to play at such a high level of competition. A lot of these guys are going to do their best to prove themselves for the first time ever, if I'm being honest with you, and I don't know how to feel about it. Maybe you want to be optimistic and believe that they proved the world wrong, or perhaps this is going to be the thing that puts them in last place to end this stage. Realistically, it's either them or the final promotion relegation team, Cheeseburger, the newcomers, that are going to come in last. I mean, with a name like that, how could you not want to see these guys succeed? That is an awesome name to have for a team, and it's honestly not that bad either. Our favorite main support Faith is out of Ultimate's jail. They've got Farmer on there and Argon. They've got some prospects who have been here before, and that to me at least gives them some kind of advantage in this situation, right? They got third place, yeah, but I think there's room for them to be better than what that record would indicate. I don't know by how much, but I could see them being better than a couple of teams in this region potentially. It's hard to find much else to say about a team like Cheeseburger or with Mirror Gaming just because there's so many unknowns going on with them and the expectations are so low. So we'll leave it there and we'll move on to my official power rankings and how I believe these teams will finish in the standings at the end of the round robin. I'll just go from bottom to top here. So at number 9, I do have Mirror Gaming. I think there's just too many unknowns on this team. I have a lot of concerns on if they can keep up with even the lower end teams that made it here in Korea. A lot of these guys, they've just never played here before, and I think that's probably for a reason to a certain extent. My expectations aren't all that high. Ruler is still a bit of a prospect himself. MCD's like the only real vet of this team, and that doesn't inspire all that much confidence in me. I do believe they're going winless. Not far behind, I have Cheeseburger for similar reasons, but I do rank them a little bit higher and think they could maybe even get 2 wins potentially, just because they do have more vets. At number 7, I'm going with Old Ocean. I think they could maybe get 6th place, but I have them 7 because I think Onside made some good moves to make their roster a little bit better on paper, but also I'm worried about the meta situation with Old Ocean. Towards the end of Stage 2, they got exposed. When Lifeweaver and Juno weren't so playable anymore, they didn't look as good. I feel like this team is relying on the more simplistic support setups for the sake of Jaehong, who obviously at this point is so far out of his prime and is mostly just doing this for fun. I'm worried he will get exposed if we continue to see more of like the Baptiste and Kiriko and Brigitte stuff. That's just not his strong suit. He can't really keep up in those situations, and I think it could be detrimental towards this team. I think between being meta-dependent and not being the most well-rounded team in the world, that it's going to allow for Onside to surpass them for the second consecutive stage. I think they have a lot more promise now that they have even more options at tank and a more consistent flex DPS and knife who really can be a star for them. They made such good upgrades and I think there's reason to believe in them now. They already were more competitive than they were supposed to be in Stage 2 at certain points, so I think with more consistency, we could see that translate into a relatively respectable stage where they more than have the opportunity to be a playoff team. But unfortunately, I don't know if they could quite crack top 5 because they don't have quite enough of those heavy hitters. I think adding Kellen and Knife is a start, but they may need a little bit more than that. As in 5th place now, I'm going with Zeta Division. This was a tough call because I think they could very easily be as good as like top 3, but I think with some of the changes they made, they might get off to a relatively slow start. They'll still be relatively good. I don't really think there's any reason to believe they'll lose to the teams I have below them, but they may struggle a little bit off the bat as they incorporate Bliss and they reincorporate Alfie back into DPS and they maybe experiment with Mag here and there. It could lead to some tough losses early on to the tough teams, but I think it will all be in an effort to be better and be good enough by the time playoffs actually begin when it matters. I think this team is in a very exciting situation where the comeback arc could start. I think at this point, it's all up to them, their personal willpower, and how much they want this. At number 4, by default, I think I'm going to go with Wei. I could see them and Zeta switching, or maybe they both go a little bit higher over something we're going to talk about in just a second. But generally, Wei are going to be gatekeepers again. Maybe they sneak off with a win against Zeta early as they try and figure some stuff out. I think this team still is decent. They are well-rounded and consistent enough to be a threat. They're going to have a decent record. They're going to be above average at the very least, and that's all I really have to say. I'm not overly impressed with this team, but you can't really sleep on them either. Then this is where some controversy may hit. Originally, I had Crazy Raccoon at number 2, but after hearing about the lip situation, I feel like they could be 3, maybe even 4 or 5, depending on how badly things go without lip. I think there is reason to believe they'll lose 1 to 2 games just because they're playing Falcons in the very first day, and then in the second week they've got T1 and everything. I think without lip, they're really going to feel it against teams of that caliber, and they may struggle a little bit. They could still be competitive, but it's going to feel like something's missing for sure. So I am anticipating they have a couple of tough losses right off the bat, 2 to 3 since they also play Wei. So don't be surprised if they don't play all that well. I feel like it's within the realm of possibilities. Now, by the time Lip returns, I'm sure they're going to rip off a big winning streak, and they're probably still going to hover around the top, in my opinion, just because they're going to play angry when they're at full force. Lip is conserving himself for this type of moment. They know that last stage was a disappointment, and whenever this team has something bad happen to them, they usually clap back in a big way. So I think Crazy Raccoon have a slow start, then play really well towards the end. Maybe meta screws them over a little bit as well. We'll have to see. But I do have them below Falcons in T1. By default, I feel like we can put T1 at number 2 because of the Crazy Raccoon circumstances. I don't know if I trust them to be consistent Giant Slayers just yet. I'd like to see them do it for another stage before I put them in that territory. But again, luckily for them, it seems like they're catching Crazy Raccoon early on when they could be in a bit of a weak spot. So I think they're probably going to get a W against them, and that'll end up putting them ahead of Crazy Raccoon in the standings. I don't quite have them being at Falcons level. I don't see a team with inconsistencies like this going undefeated, but they are more than good enough to be in second place. I mean, they just did it last stage, and there's a lot of things going their way this time around too. So I think that's a good place to put them. Really good, but kind of on the bubble of being truly elite. That, of course, leaves us with Team Falcons as my number 1 team in Korea. I think they will be in first place by the end of the round robin. And while I don't think it's a lock necessarily that they are guaranteed to be the best team, I like their chances, again, because like I said before, they are a very momentum-based team, and they're coming off of a EWC championship. That was a big moment for them after what happened in the EWC last year, and after all the nonsense they went through throughout Stage 2, they found a new resolve and a new set of confidence. When this team wins, everything is right in the world, and they also feel like they're the best in crunch time when we're headed towards that playoffs and championship territory. So I expect them to continue to bring their A game, especially because the Ram Rush setup could continuously be good for the time being, and that's where they feel the most at home. So I love where this Falcons team is at. When they play well, when Proper looks like how he did in the EWC, nobody can stop them but themselves. But yeah, that's kind of how I see the structure of the Korea standings going. 9 through 6 realistically could all be somewhat interchangeable. They're around the same level, you could argue. Then it's like Zeta and AGG are in this weird wildcard situation where maybe they could be fighting for top 3, maybe not. But then Falcons, Crazy Raccoon, and T1 are probably all in their own tier, knowing what we saw in the previous stage. Anything can happen there. I'm excited to see more rivalries unfold as we start the countdown to the end of the season. Korea Stage 3 is going to be absolutely epic with some of the most recent events, and I think this might be the most excited I've ever been for a particular stage since switching to OWCS. But yeah, that's basically going to do it for me in this one. Let me know what you think about the upcoming OWCS Korea stage down in the comments below and where you would rank these teams. And if you enjoyed the video, it would mean a lot if you could give it a like and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And until the next one, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.